Hello, welcome to a Cozy Cora explanation, I suppose. Trigger warnings, I will be talking in depth about eating disorders. Also a content warning, I will be mentioning pregnancies and periods. There are emergency hotlines listed here. There will also be contacts and websites listed in the description.
Tell me you don't want to put that in your mouth. Hell, this makes me want to eat dirt as an adult. And I did not think this was going to be a sound that I liked.
Why does she want to eat paint? Well, first we have to understand what cravings are. The Oxford Dictionary defines cravings as either a strong desire for something, like a craving for chocolate, or a strong desire to do something, like a desperate craving to be loved. Food cravings are strong urges for food that are more specific than mere hunger and can be very difficult to resist. These wants stray from your typical harmful urges, such as alcohol, tobacco, and sugar. More research now points to a significant role in food cravings and weight-related pathology, although more research is always needed. A strong theme, more research being needed in this video, so stick with me. We've all looked at something that isn't food and wanted to eat it, like slime or decorative soap. I mean, it's kind of a human reaction. But then there are those cravings that make less sense, like Tide Pods, and there are those people who crave it more than just, oh, I wonder what that would taste like, and just try it. There are people who actively desire less conventional foods. We can see this common phenomenon in modern media. I mean, just look at TLC and their My Strange Addiction series. Now, I'm not one to cite TLC as a trustworthy source. I mean, their main goal is to mock the people in their shows. But they have an undoubtedly large amount of non-food related craving cases. Just look at Heather.
And I'm addicted to drinking paint.
And then there's Teresa.
Can't go more than a few hours without eating rocks.
Okay, but why? Well, the most obvious reason is xylophagia, or Pica. Pica is a neurological disorder that globally affects 27.8 to 68% of pregnant people. Pica is present in 18.5% of children and 10% of children older than 12. All cases of Pica are made up by 20 to 30% of small children, 20% pregnant women, and 10 to 15% are people with learning disabilities. Pica disorder is a type of eating disorder in which a person has a compulsive urge to eat something or crave things that have no nutritional value or aren't edible. A person with Pica may eat harmless things with no nutrition, such as ice, or they may eat potentially dangerous items. Pica commonly co-occurs in people who have other neurological disorders like OCD, ASD, ADHD, and schizophrenia. People with Pica feel an involuntary urge to eat inedible and uncommonly craved items such as ice, paper, dirt, paint, cigarette ashes, and things like that. But let's get into more detail. The DSM-5 gives an overview of the symptoms. The symptoms have to be persistent for 1 month or more. It has to be developmentally inappropriate. It cannot be part of a culture, and it must stick out. The ICD-11 defines the requirements for Pica as 1. Regular consumption of non-nutritive substances, such as non-food objects and materials. 2. The ingestion of non-nutritive substances is persistent or severe enough to require clinical attention. That is, the behavior causes damage or significant risk to health or impairment in functioning due to the frequency, amount, or nature of the substance or object ingested. 3. Based on age and level of intellectual functioning, the individual would be expected to distinguish between edible and non-edible substances. In typical development, this occurs in approximately 2 years of age. 4. The symptoms or behaviors are not manifested of other medical conditions. To get diagnosed with Pica, you have to display these behaviors for at least a month. Ingesting non-food objects cannot be part of the person's culture. Pica is developmentally inappropriate. This means that the behavior stands out from the norm. Young children tend to put non-food items in their mouth. However, this does not mean that they have Pica. The most common causes for Pica are iron deficiencies, anemia, and malnutrition. When no nutritional deficiencies exist, it's harder to pin down the exact cause of Pica. It becomes more of a symptom to other conditions than a condition itself. Often, people with Pica also have other mental health disorders and neurodiversities. Many cases of Pica eating disorders begin in childhood and are related to childhood experiences. As the person ages, they will choose to eat non-food items that are connected to their childhood and their childhood homes. Experts theorize that this type of Pica may be caused by childhood trauma. Thus, the person strives to find a way back to the childhood that they lost due to their traumatic experience. This, however, needs to be researched more since the psychology of memory is heavily debated. Childhood trauma is generally a hot potato as well, since people like eating stuff even though they don't have Pica. Going in depth into more of the outside factors as well as the reasons Pica occurs, we'll be looking at the behavioral patterns of pregnant people and menstruation periods, as well as children. Most information online comes from Appetite, journal, by Elsevier. I don't know. I literally cannot find a PDF of it or any version of it that I can read because yay, dyslexia. So I will mainly be referring to the inductive study by Natalia C. Orlov and Julia M. Hormes, Pickles and Ice Cream, Food Cravings and Pregnancies, Hypotheses, Primary Evidence, and Directions for Future Studies. Starting with pregnancy. Hormones. Hormone levels like estrogen and specific foods have not been linked by any credible research. Important to note. There is, however, a generic lack of research. So if you're a researcher, get on that. I might actually get on it myself. Anyway, I'm gonna stay on track. So, what is significant? Sensory perception changes in pregnant people. These changes has been linked to hormones in a study by Mutsumi Kunga. I'm so sorry. I tried. In July 2019, in their study, changes in gustatory senses during pregnancy. The study showed that 92.8% experienced some sort of change in taste during pregnancy. Usually a change in sour taste, about 60%. Pregnant people had higher gustatory thresholds than non-pregnant people, with an especially marked decrease in gustatory function being noticed in the first trimester. The decrease in gustatory function during the first trimester is considered to be due to the notable changes in secretion hormones that occur during this stage. Pregnant people show a tendency to ingest a large amount of secondary compounds, which leads to an increased sense of taste and olfactory senses, which may serve to discourage consumption of potentially toxic foods in pregnancy, according to a Nordine study in 2004, and could also be responsible for changing food perception and patterns in consumption. This means that any changes in hormone production or intake can lead to changed sensory perception, which then changes food craving patterns. This has been used to explain why you being on your period makes you crave chocolate. This is, however, an oversimplification and has not been scientifically proven. Malnutrition. It has also been theorized that the chocolate cravings are caused by iron deficiencies. While it is possible that menstruation causes nutritional deficiencies, since, you're bleeding out, it is extremely unlikely that the chocolate could abate the deficiency more effectively than a variety of other foods that are non-commonly craved, like red meat. which again proves that the chocolate cravings are a bigger mystery than eating paper. However, staying on the topic of malnutrition, pregnant people have a whole fetus to nutrify, which is a word, I looked it up, which makes malnutrition a much more sensible explanation for those cases. Fetal demands can double requirements for certain nutrition. It has been speculated that food cravings serve to prevent or alleviate nutritional deficiencies. This could mean that pregnant people primarily report urges for foods high in levels of micronutrients that the childbearer needs. But as expected, a majority of studies found that sweets, high-fat foods, and fast food were to be predominantly craved. This then suggests that while some women crave potentially beneficial foods, like meat and other high-protein foods, many of the most commonly reported cravings are for comfort foods. Important to note is that some research shows that the typical dietary intake in the middle to upper income pregnancies in the US are likely to meet all dietary needs to the point where the widespread practice of prescribing prenatal vitamin supplements may lead to excessive nutritional intake. This means that there is no real evidence for a significant association between food cravings and dietary quality in pregnancies. However, it is also important to note that the main cause of Pica is an iron deficiency. So you'd think that there would be research to prove that, but like I said, research is needed. Moving on. Addictive substances. Going back to the example of chocolate, there's no secret that chocolate can be addictive. The high sugar and fat content makes your taste buds and brain go, yummy, yummy, give me some more of that, please. The methylxanthines, which is a group of compounds with potentially energizing effects, are one example of a hypothesized active ingredient in chocolate, according to a study by Rogers and Smith in 2004. A 60-gram serving of milk chocolate contains around 12 milligrams of caffeine, which isn't that much. But eating chocolate increases enkephalin, resulting in the need to consume more chocolate. It basically just means it's addictive. Another explanation behind chocolate's addictive potential is a stimulating chemical called theobromine. Theobromine, when combined with caffeine, has a positive effect on a person's mood and can also cause an aphrodisiac boost, aka you get horny. This means that the addictive properties of chocolate become more desirable as a person is in physical and emotional discomfort. So like if you're sad and you're like, I want to feel good, your brain is like, oh, I know what will make you feel good. I know I can give you an aphrodisiac boost. Chocolate. This can also be viewed from a Pavlovian perspective in the sense of cognitive schemas, which view parallels and the theorized medicinal effects of ingredients in chocolate in lessening premenstrual symptoms, and is supported to some extent by the fact that food aversion and the craving frequently co-occurs, as proven by a study by Bayley in 2002. With some indications that aversions precede the development of the craving. This behavior is then exceeded by the factor of pregnancy or other states of discomfort. Pregnant people have reported perceived experiences of a positive connection between the occurrence of pregnancy sickness and the development of food cravings, as proven by a study by Whitehead. I swear to God, that's the name. I'm not being racist. In 1992. It should be noted that the exact nature of a possible causal relationship between food aversions and cravings may be difficult to determine due to the fact that cravings for food providing relief from nausea may not develop for up to 2 weeks after the initial onset of the illness, as proven by the previously mentioned Bayley study. More research is, of course, again, like always, needed to assess the temporal dynamic and the relationship between food aversions and cravings, and the hypothesized role of craved foods in alleviating parental nausea and vomiting. culture. Following the Pavlovian theme, but mixing in social norms as an encourager for the cognitive schemas, culture has long been known to be a powerful determinant of our eating behaviors, and the proposed model of craving etiology hypothesizes a key role of cultural norms in the emergence of food cravings, since it is the most scientifically proven and understood in the sense of social norms. In the absence of strong evidence in favor of psychological or biochemical causes of premenstrual chocolate cravings, studies have consistently identified significant differences in the overall prevalence, types, and gender ratio for food cravings across the various cultures. For example, white chocolate is by far the most commonly craved food in the US. Hardly anyone in Egypt endorses a strong urge for chocolate or general sweet cravings, according to Parker's study in 2003. However, data also suggests that there are culture-specific differences in recorded types, perceived meaning, and psychosocial correlates of cravings in pregnancy. An early study found that pregnant endosilo women experience nausea, vomiting, and aversions associated with food, reflected in their traditional roles as wives and mothers. In 1963. Cravings reported by these women were categorized as childhood foods, foods expressing hostility, finger food, rare or expensive foods, festival foods, sour foods, male phallic foods. I'm not sure, the study doesn't explain what they mean by male or phallic foods. It is listed, so I will mention it. And aristocratic food, like sentimental foods, like comfort foods. Pregnant women in Nigeria proclaimed that their most craved foods, fruits, vegetable, and cereal, which provided nutritional benefits, justifying their consumption, with the belief that they are a good source of bodybuilding nutrients. The most common craving reported in Tanzania were fish, vegetables, fruits, and grains, as proven by a study by Patil in 2012. Provision of craved foods to pregnant women by their husbands and his family is considered an expression of social support in rural Tanzania. Going back to the Indo-Ceylon cultures, the doula cannot be satisfied until the substance is consumed, and if it is not satisfied, the woman is said to endure significant anxiety and stress until consumption is relieved. These studies provide primary support in favor of the role of culture associations and types of food cravings in pregnancy. Though more work is needed, like always, to systematically compare and contrast the nature, prevalence, and significance of food cravings and pregnancies across diverse cultures. I mean, just the word cravings doesn't really translate into most languages, suggesting that the construct may be less important or altogether unknown in some other cultures, as discussed in Hormes and Rosin's study in 2012. Going into something I find extremely interesting and which is extremely relevant in today's food culture: forbidden foods. We can also call this the forbidden fruit effect, referring to the apple in Eve's garden. Conflicting attitudes towards foods like chocolate that are perceived to be simultaneously appealing and forbidden have recently been hypothesized to be associated with a greater likelihood of craving, as proven by Hormes and Rosin's study. Ambivalent feelings towards chocolate and similar foods are likely to be especially common in US women who are exposed to a culture that promote largely unrealistic ideals of feminine beauty, as discussed in Thompson's and Stice's study from 2001, while at the same time providing easy access to large quantities of highly palatable, calorically dense foods. Evidence suggests that the efforts to avoid foods that cause these conflicting feelings may have a paradoxical effect of increasing the likelihood of cravings. Since the more you try to avoid something, the more irresistible it becomes. Applying this to our main topic of craving non-food objects, it's clear why the forbidden jelly is so commonly craved, and the result of this sort of vicious cycle of alternating restraints and overconsumption of binge eating. Multiple studies have demonstrated how dieting to lose weight and restricting intake of well-liked foods lead to an increase of the salience of foods, internal or external cues related to that food as a result in frequency of craving. Proven by so many studies, I'm just gonna put them on screen because God almighty, too many names. A recent-ish from 2011 study found that US women who experience cyclical increases in chocolate craving report significantly greater levels of dietary restraint, less flexible control over food intake, more guilt when consuming chocolate, and higher body mass, proven by the Hormes and Timko study from 2011, supporting the notion that eating-related pathology may have a causal role in craving etiology, which basically means it's all connected, baby. It's all one big circle, and the circle is rolling down a hill, coming for you. Anyway, a feeling of ambivalence towards highly palatable and calorically dense foods is a central aspect of the proposed model of craving etiology. It is thought that these ambivalent feelings heighten the salience of food-related cues, resulting in an increased likelihood of food cravings. There is some evidence for conflicting feelings related to food in pregnant people. For example, it has been argued that in US pregnancies, the idea of eating for two takes on a moral significance such that healthy eating in pregnancy is consistent with the perceived ideal of good motherhood, while consuming unhealthy foods is the cause of considerably conflicting feelings, as proven by a study in 2007. Menstrual cravings have previously been found to be associated with elevated levels with eating disorder symptomology, according to Homer and Timko study in 2011, and it can be hypothesized that the maladaptive eating-related attitudes and behaviors may also increase the likelihood of parental cravings. Additional support for the view of pregnancy as socially acceptable time for women to indulge comes from sociological research that finds pregnant people to take on a more functional view of their body, which legitimizes divergence from cultural ideas of thinness and restraint, as proven by Bayley study in 2001. Remarkably, only 4.5% of respondents described efforts to resist their cravings. It thus appears that in the US, culture-specific norms, beliefs, and customs may allow or even encourage parental cravings and intakes of foods that might otherwise be considered taboo, which is discussed in Snow's and Johnson's study in 1978. As a result, the views on these cravings lead to the person overindulging instead of avoiding unhealthy foods. I would still like to put most emphasis on the forbiddenness of unhealthy food and not the taboo being overlooked for pregnant people. Children. And then the pregnant ladies give birth. Wow, the miracle of life. But what's that? The baby's starting to eat crayons and gravels and oh my god. What's up with that? The baby isn't pregnant, right? I mean, of course not. Do you even know what a baby is? But yeah, let's understand this phenomenon from a different perspective. Curiosity. A baby doesn't know anything until they've learned it, and humans are naturally curious. I mean, think about it. If you don't know anything, and the only thing you have in front of you is a box of crayons, they're so cool looking, and you're getting kind of hungry, why not sneak a little taste? Arts and craft supplies surround children, who often go a moment or two unsupervised, bored even. For instance, most children's crayons or colored pencils packs are sensed to mimic certain fruits or foods. Some children are curious to see if their orange crayons really does taste like orange, while others take a bite just to see what happens, says Christine Crowley, a pediatrician and medical doctor at Province Medical Group, Scholl's Pediatrics. Teething. Before we get into it, side note, I gagged, literally, trying to find a picture for this segment. Don't judge me for the picture I used, it's literally the only one I can look at. Don't Google teething babies if you have a weak stomach or, hate babies. You'd think that'd be obvious, but yet here we are. Also, if you are a baby, no offense, I just think you're gross. Anyway, teething. If you don't know what teething is, kidshealth.org defines teething as when teeth first come through a baby's gum. It can be a frustrating time for babies and their parents, and the child needs something to gnaw on to help with that kind of pain, to self-soothe. Children often chew on soft rubber or silicone to teeth. The comfort and pain-relieving sensation can stay connotated as the child grows up, and so it continues to crave those textures even though it has all its teeth. So it becomes a habit for the child to crave that sort of sensation, like biting rubber. Oral fixations, don't be gross. It's a Freudian term, which in itself is gross, I know, but you can't ignore the man's research altogether. Anywho, Freud stated that within the first 18 months of a child's existence, they will experience an oral fixation, which means you partake in an obsessive behavior that involves the mouth. This type of behavior usually sticks around if the child is neurodiverse, and is prevalent in adults in behaviors like smoking, drinking, gum chewing, so basically like fidgeting with your mouth as a way to self-soothe. AKA stimming, because again, everything is autism. Even neurotypical adults tend to have oral fixations just on a smaller scale, which is when some people try to stop smoking, transitioning to vaping or other kinds of e-cigarettes is a way to fulfill that oral fixation that you crave from smoking. Kids who have an oral fixation have a constant desire to put objects in their mouth. It can become an obsession, and the objects can range from toys, paper, to clothing, or anything else they can get their hands on, explains Dr. Crowley. Crowley then goes on to say, kids with an oral fixation tend to be less socially mature than other kids. So if your child has a problem with separation, this might be caused by their fascination with eating crayons, which I find hilarious, since it's obviously a sign of autism if the child has an oral fixation and can't socialize, and Crowley phrases it like crayons are stunting the child's socialization skills. It's like she's saying that, hey, if your kid is neurodiverse, maybe it's caused by the crayons. I know that's not what she's saying, but she phrased it in such an accusatory way. It's hilarious. Anywho, deficiencies. Deficiencies obviously occur in children too, especially picky eaters. Dr. Crowley states that when kids have iron deficiency anemia, they don't have enough iron to produce hemoglobin. This causes some strange eating habits. Some cases have been linked to children and adults consuming non-edible foods like ice, clay, and dirt. However, as discussed earlier, the causal link is very hard to prove, and again, as discussed earlier, an iron deficiency, especially anemia, is the most common cause for Pica, so I don't understand why the causal link is so hard to prove if it's the main cause, but Jesus Christ, these scientists are not doing their work. Like, my guy, stop competing for the Ig Nobel Prize, stop proving cats are liquid, and try to understand brains instead, please. Like I said when I discussed what Pica is, it co-occurs most often in children with neurodiversities and in pregnant people. So the co-occurrences are so strong that basically not even a co-occurrence, and it's just a symptom at that point. Some scraps. So what makes the Pica or Pica-like behavior stronger? Unsurprisingly, developmental disorders. I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat this, but autism is everywhere. Anything that has to do with sensory perception is going to be related to neurodiversities. That's just a given. Mental health disorders, like OCD. Same goes here. Obsessive compulsive behavior sounds like OCD. I didn't talk about it much, about how the people with Pica feel, but oh god, is it hard to not lose focus. But basically, the non-eating food behavior is commonly displayed as a need or a tic, almost. It's most often involuntary and shameful for the person, but their brain isn't giving them a choice. It's much like how OCD works. Stress. Pica, like any disorder, doesn't come from being perfectly happy and satisfied. It's often seen in people living in poverty or in those who suffer neglect. This means that stress can make the behaviors worse. Malnutrition and hunger. Non-food items may provide a sense of fullness, especially paper. Deficiencies in iron or zinc. This could trigger specific cravings. As mentioned a gazillion times, iron deficiencies trigger Pica. Eat your fucking spinach, for God's sake. It's delicious, I promise. Just do it, just force yourself. Eat it however you want, just get that sweet, sweet iron. You can do it, I believe in you. I haven't figured out how to write outros yet, but thank you for watching. Let me know if the video sucked, please, genuinely, accept any sort of critique, and equally begging and genuinely, if you're affected by any of this, check out the resources in the description. It's so important to reach out for help if you struggle with any sort of harmful behavior. So now you know, the answer to everything is autism. Always remember that you are loved. Bye bye. We can see this common phenomenon. We can see this common phenomenon in the modern. We can see this modern phenomenon. We can see this common. Sorry. We can see this common phenomenon. We can see this common. We can see this common phenomenon. We can see this common phenomenon. Is it phenomenon? Phenomenon. We can see this common phenomenon in this. I'm shooting myself.